Hi, this is Phil, and I'm here to tell you all about the Capes and Lunatics Patreon. Get early access to all of our interviews, including the monthly Chichester Chats with writer and comic book legend DG Chichester, new episodes of classic Capes and Lunatics shows, including The Quantum Zone, This, That, or the Third, and many, many more specials, all completely uncensored. Access starts for $3 a month, full video when you pledge $5 a month. Check out the link in our show notes or go to patreon.com/CapesandLunatics. Hope to see you there. Hello everyone, welcome back to another month of the Chichester Chats with myself, Phil, Lilith, and of course, putting the Chichester in Chichester Chats, Mr. DG Chichester, putting on that extra body part.
Yeah, I brought some extra parts. Was there theme music? I didn't hear.
No, that's what I said. Well, I'll add it later, but I must hunt down some theme music. Lilith, you know what I gotta do? I gotta reach out to Mikey Flash, like, I need a song with Dan Chichester's name in these lyrics. I need lyrics.
Excellent. Excellent. It's like a breakfast cereal theme. It's good. It's good.
I'm thinking Mr. Black Armor has to be in there somewhere. Something.
Yes. Just ask AI to write some, shitty lyrics, and we'll be off to the races.
We like to support real artists. Mikey Flash is.
Oh yeah.
Oh no, absolutely. I'm all for that. I was on a meeting yesterday, and these people were just like going off of like, I can get AI to do the voices for my audiobook and get AI to do this. Like, why don't you just hire somebody to do it? You know why? It's cheaper. That's the point.
No,
I know it's cheaper.
I know, but that's why all these people are.
And there would be an efficiency to it, but it's also like you can also get some people to do things relatively cheap.
Yeah.
Go shop around. Find somebody.
Yeah, everybody's losing their mind over AI, and it's like, well, we're just gonna have to see where everything shakes out legally and ethically. That's all I'll say.
Well, like quality wise, I mean, people who've never done a whit of creative work in their life, go on and on about like, oh my God, it's the most amazing thing ever.
Yeah.
And like, it's incredible. This isn't possible in any other way. Somebody I worked with on something, right? They just asked it to write some subject lines, for a fairly serious, for emails, for like an email marketing assignment. And they asked it to write some subject lines to get attention around a fairly, like I said, serious subject. And it came back with, wowie, you don't really want to pay attention to this.
It's like all that AI and like the dating stuff. It's just like the same prompt over. I'm the guy who you should not you shouldn't swipe left on or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like it's just okay. Let's just grab the most obvious things. And I guess if you've never put 5 minutes to thinking through something, it seems like it's a miracle. But I've yet to see an instance of oh my God, that never would have happened without AI, but anyway.
But on a happier note, we're talking some
let's talk about a non-artificial intelligence, Mr. Chichester here. Yes.
Well, non-artificial at least. But yeah, this was a fun assignment this month, guys. Thank you for pulling him out of the morgue.
That's right.
The crypt, not the morgue, the crypt, or wherever he was gathering up some body parts.
Here we go, kids. Yes, because we are talking Terror 6 and 7 here, kids.
So for folks who do not know, does somebody want to recap what Terror is, or is that my job?
I think you're more.
I think we prefer to hear.
I think that's more appropriate coming from you.
Well, we could go into the whole backstory.
He's like you explain it. I'll tell you if you're wrong.
Yeah, yes. We'll see. Let's see where you go with this. I had somebody do that once, and it's like, and they got it pretty right. They'd never read it before, and so they sort of encapsulated it. But anyway, Terror was an unfortunately short-lived regular series, 13 issues from back in the heyday, he was the anti-heroist of anti-heroists. I don't even know if hero was even in there. He was a straight up mercenary, and his shtick was and is, since apparently he continues to survive on the fringes of the Marvel universe in some ways, although rarely used, is he is really an ancient character of prehistory even. And over the course of this history, for whatever reason, he has gained the ability to steal other body parts, hands and arms and eyes and ears and tongues and whatever, and graft them onto himself. I'm sure there's a explanation about rapid molecular acid disintegration, reintegration, somewhere that was done at one point of how this actually works. But in doing so, two things happen. He gains the physical ability of that. So if he gets a kickboxer's legs, he can fight like a kickboxer. If he gets a sniper's eye, he can focus in on something with great accuracy. So he gains those attributes in this sort of icky taskmaster sort of way.
The most gruesomest of copycat skills.
The most gruesomest of copycat. See, that could have been the little title thing, that
the most gruesome copycat.
Come by me for some copy anytime. Don't worry about it.
Lilith Hellfire, she'll give you better descriptions than AI.
But at the same time, he gains, unfortunately for him, the emotional components of that. So when he takes these body parts, he is also saddled with the memories and the emotional resonance of that. So if he steals that sniper's eye, and that sniper happened to be a soldier deployed and missing his daughter, he's going to be saddled with that. So he's got to work his way through this, which is important for him because he approaches things, at least in this interpretation of the character, as all business. He is this hyper efficient businessman. The book was actually called Terror Incorporated because the character was called Terror, but the Incorporated was because he ran this sort of mercenary operation where he would take on any vile, violent, ferocious assignment, from murder, intimidation, conspiracy, anything that required the dirty dark side. He was the guy to do it in a hyper efficient, business oriented way. And he was a hoot to work on and create. Created him with Margaret Clark and Klaus Janson.
Well, I had a quick question. So originally he was from the Epics line. So what kind of red tape did that take to get him over into the main Marvel content?
Good deep cut, and no prize comes your way for you knew that.
Read St. George, it's good.
So St. George was one of three titles in the Epic line that were meant to be a superhero universe. They were a superhero universe. They were called the Shadow Line, and we had created what would become Terror as the character, the exact same character, exact same look, exact same attributes, except his name there was Shrek, which was German for terror. And over the course of time, we would find that this character was so long-lived, every language had the word for terror in it, and he was essentially it. So if he was Italian, he was Formidor. If he was in Germany, he was Shrek. And so when that line went away, well, that character was great, but I guess nothing's going to happen with him now. But Marvel actually, and it was Carl Potts specifically who called me one day and said that Marvel was thinking about doing something with all the horror characters, and like Werewolf by Night and Dracula and Frankenstein and all maybe Man-Thing, any of the horror characters. They want to do something. This was before Midnight Suns, came around, and they wanted a kind of a central character who might play a kind of a crypt keeper role. And Carl had really loved Terror, even though I can't say looking at Carl and knowing Carl, that would have been the immediate thing I would have keyed into, that Carl would have been all about. But Carl has many layers, and he really liked it when it was in the Shadow Line. And so he called and said, "Would you want to do this?" And I was like, "Well, yeah." I don't think I've ever said no to anything. When people are like, "Oh, what do you think you might want to?" I don't know. You're going to pay me to tell a story? Sure. So we started working on this, or I started working on this, and I was kind of into it, and I'd figured out, okay, we'll do this, and we'll give him an operation, we'll give him, some surrounding characters. But not too long after, Carl, called and said, well, no, they're not going to do that anymore, probably because they had begun working on what they would become the Midnight Suns, even though that hadn't really kicked off yet. And I said, oh, okay, well, I guess we're done with this. And he said, no. why don't we just do him as his own character? Why don't we just bring him into the Marvel universe? And this was in the heyday of bad attitude characters, right? Your Lobos and your Punishers and everything. So here was one more guy who could be a shit kicker and a face smasher and all these other things. And I was like, oh, okay. And it was as easy as that. They just said, let's do it. They sort of pretended, or at least Mark McLaurin, who was the editor, God bless him. He would always sort of like, no, it's not the same character. And then I would always say, yes, of course, it's obviously the exact same character. But there was never any transitional story that we did, to sort of say, how did he get from, whatever the Shadowline Earth is to Earth, 616 or something. There was never any of that. We just jumped in as if he had always been there. He'd always been in operation. And he was a sort of, even when I'd have him meet other characters, sometimes it would be brand new, but then sometimes I would sort of acknowledge that there was a history there. When we did the Wolverine crossover, I think I purposefully suggested that they had met before. So obviously there was a prehistory, at least in my mind. So there was no red tape. It was, as many things were, very, very easy and just fun to be able to jump into the story.
I was going to say, yeah. I mean, that makes sense. Wolverine's met everybody, literally, everyone.
Yeah, and he's
why
also, been around a long time. So
exactly. Yeah, that was the thinking.
Although that would have been unique. The one person the Wolverine's never met before.
Right. We've been avoiding each other. That could have been the other way. Yeah. But I don't remember you. Last time you were a different shade of green. Yeah.
I thought it was funny. The funniest thing about these issues is it seems like it's harder for him to get a tailored suit than actual human body parts.
Well, rereading it, yes, I really enjoyed those little supporting cast characters, the little Brunhilde, Taylor, and using him as a pincushion, and that was fun. Even him stealing the tie off the dead guy, the guy he kills. Rips his legs off for a new set of legs. He seems to lose his legs a lot. He does. But even stealing that tie because he's got to look, and I think that was the counterpoint to the character, and he knows he is the most horrifying thing walking around. So this erudite look, this tailored look is an important quality to him, right? So he's always got to look good, even though he clearly does not look good.
I mean, did you ever get into that where it's like, oh, I might need suits in several sizes? Because what if he grabs a guy with longer legs or shorter legs? Or
I didn't, although that would have been something to definitely play up. I mean, aside from, that was kind of the reason for the tailor, to be able to have him have the fashion, but also for that exact reason that he would constantly be shifting, sizes. And it was kind of, Jorge was Zafino, who was the artist on the first set of these issues, was an amazingly inspired choice on Mark's part. He was not probably the most commercial artist in many ways, and maybe that didn't resonate with audiences of the day who were certainly gravitating around toward image-like looks. But I can't think of anybody who would have done it better in terms of the ferocity and just the impressionistic look of it. But I love that scene where he's got his shirt off and, he's being retailored. He's this kind of just skeletal, frail figure right now, right? For as ferocious and monstrous and intimidating as he is, when he takes the shirt off, at least in this incarnation, Jorge went with this very frail, bruised, figure, which I thought was an interesting, choice.
I know, yeah, I saw that. I was like, oh, he's like a tiny green man. I'm like, that's not the image I got for, yeah.
Right. But maybe he had swapped his chest out in between scenes. I don't know.
Oh, maybe.
No. We're not gonna gloss over this. My favorite thing in this issue, it just gave me some nostalgia. You mentioned microfiche, and I was like, oh, to be the days in elementary school and the library.
When that was the thing. Oh, yes, there was it definitely has some references there. And I like the library. I like librarians, and yet I was very brutal to them.
I know. It's like he had to learn microfiche. I'm like, he's so old. Shouldn't he have learned all the old technology? Well, I guess microfiche wasn't.
Well,
at
this
then,
point, this was the technology. You'd go into a library. There wasn't the
Ditto
internet.
Machine.
There wasn't. Yeah, there wasn't. This was how you looked up stuff in the library. You either went to the Dewey Decimal System and you looked your book up, or you went to the, oh wow, look, you can get these little these microfiche kids, was these little micro, almost like mini X-rays, almost like blue mini X-rays that would take any books, and they would condense them down to these micro images, which you could then put into a display reader, and so you'd find old books and old references and newspapers and research materials on these little mini X-rays, and then you could put them into a large display reader and research things that way. No Wi-Fi required. But
that's it. I mean, the other day I was talking to a friend of mine, Tyler Lilith, and his son was, I don't know, they were watching something, and it said, "Oh, do you remember a time before Google?" And his son asked him, he's like, "Do you remember a time before Google?" He's like, "Yeah, we had encyclopedias."
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, these kids don't remember.
The household set.
And infamously, my wife, to this day, something comes on, like, an old show, like a phone with a wire, to the infuriation of my son. It's like, that's how we used to have to use phones, with wires attached to them. And it's like, okay, I think he's got it at this point. I think he's okay.
Where you had to stick your finger in and swirl each number.
Yes, swirl it around, swirl the numbers. Anyway,
and I can't believe we'd even hit the one of the other big points of these issues. Everyone's favorite other favorite killer shows up, Frank Castle.
Yes, and purposefully. This was again like let's do the guest stars to make sure we're getting some sales attention.
I mean, in the 90s, yeah, like a Punisher guest appearance is kind of mandatory. But again, I mean, I think. You use Frank because you like Frank, because you use Frank and others.
Oh, I like Frank
too.
I think Frank is appropriately treated here. And Frank, I think I always treated Frank appropriately. I leaned into the mission and the intention of the character. I never leaned into yes, he is extraordinarily violent, and that is acknowledged, throughout the story. But I don't lean into the violence as I'm like gleefully like all over it in any way. I always thought, I was inspired always by Steve Grant's take on the character, and I always give him credit for really kind of activating something in my mind of how the character should be treated. But that's the essence of the story. If you guys, listeners, watchers, aliens picking up these signals and viewing them in holographic ways, these two issues, Terror has an assignment to assassinate for reasons that are not known until the end of the story, which we might give spoilers away since this is like 30 plus years later. But he is supposed to assassinate an old school gangster, Piranha Jones, who is, for reasons we find out, relocated from his operations in the big city to the suburbs of Stamford, Connecticut, where I grew up. And I
knew it. And
no, this whole thing is is chock full of in jokes and references. But the Punisher, just being after anybody who reeks of crime in any way, shape, or form, has come to the suburbs because he doesn't want somebody like Piranha Jones infecting the suburbs. Like here, the suburbs are back in the 90s, perceived as a more crime-free or pure neighborhood. So he's going to protect it by removing this blight. But that puts him in conflict with Terror because Terror wants the money for the contract. He's not going to let Frank kill him for free. And that would be against Terror's sense of business.
And Terror's, don't do it for free.
Exactly. And he doesn't, it would be against his sense of business honor to have the Punisher kill this guy and then collect the fee, for it, for example. And then he doesn't even want to kill the Punisher at one point, even though he easily could at the beginning of the storyline, because he just figures, well, at some point somebody's going to take a contract out on this guy, and I may as well be the one to get that contract, so I'm not going to kill him for free. So they're really just, it's like degrees of disreputable motivations and intentions. But I mean, clearly whoever was writing this thing was having a ball, at least to me. I mean, this is just.
I cover for 7, by the way, with him
in the Punisher outfit. Yeah, I mean,
whose idea was that? Do you remember?
That had to be Marcus, and or maybe it was Jorge. And Marcus communicated it to Jorge, but whoever did it, it's just brilliant. I mean, I loved it. I loved the hell out of it. It was just. I should make a poster out of that, but nobody would know who that character was for conventions.
Oh, you'd be surprised.
Yeah, come on.
I always get people who, there's at least always one person who's a Terror Incorporated fan, and I usually have a poster and I have some stuff on a banner, and that person, if they mention Terror Incorporated, I always have like a collection of like Terror buttons and like Terror buttons and like stickers and stuff, and I'll give them away to people if they mention it. It's like the bonus word.
You never know. You could draw some people and be like, who's that? Well, let me tell you.
Yeah, I describe it. And I mean, you don't want to say it was ahead of its time, but I think in some ways it was, because it was the type of character that seems like he would fit much more into today's environment than at that point. I think Cliff Biggers, somebody wrote a really nice like mini review when it came out, and they just described it's incredibly violent, it's incredibly horrifying, it's got the it's got the most twisted like scheme imaginable. It's like nothing else Marvel's putting out, and that's a good thing. But that's also probably like, if you're looking for, for the ordinary
the letters page, right, where somebody's like, don't recycle the character or whatever. Somebody was really just giving them the business.
Yeah. So I didn't even see it. I mean, I think you guys cued me into it, or maybe Phil, you did. Maybe that there was a Spider-Man 2099.
Yeah,
something like that, or which is coming up pretty quick, so they better move that date ahead. Appearance of Terror Incorporated. I think he had like more of a cyber overcoat or something like that, or a cyber.
Yeah, something like
But I didn't see it, or I didn't read it. Did anybody read it?
I did read it. I mean, it was a quick one appearance. It was just that one issue. So.
Oh, was he sort of the character?
Yeah, I believe it was the same character. It was just, he's kept living. Yes.
Right. Yeah. But he felt like they treated him sort of like what he should be. Or
I think so. Yeah. I mean, it seemed like I said, it was a very quick appearance. But yeah, it seemed like he was. Yeah.
That's cool. I thought they were going to do a little more with him after they made a not a big deal out of it, but they sort of like featured that this character's here, and then he was kind of gone, I guess, again. So,
well, I mean, I think they are starting. I don't know if they're starting up like a new 2099 line or something. So he might pop back in there if they're going to do that. I don't know.
Maybe. I have an idea just to do a mini series with it, but I need to get my I need Cebulski to be in the right frame of mind.
You know where he should appear? They're doing that big Blood Hunt event right now with all the vampires.
Yeah, I'm sure that's all. I would assume that's all plotted.
Oh, I'm sure it is. Yeah,
and you would hope, but you don't know. They could be really chasing their deadlines.
Well, what is me and Loth were talking about last night? Like, and then they're going to be starting like another like a Venom event. Like before Blood Hunt's even over, they're starting up they're going to start the next event. That's how they do it now. It's like they start the next one before the first one's even over.
Right, and then they
sales and marketing.
Well, you have to, that's fine, but then does it have implications, or does it just get retconned out? And then I'm just really weirded out by the how everything just always reshifts back to one, and creative teams only stay in books for like 5 issues, and
sometimes they get a whole year.
Right. They get a whole year, 12 issues. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I say
it's different. We say that all the time. We always joke, modern comics could never.
Well, I had one artist describe it to me, and I respect it, totally. But it was like, well, it's a lot of work. We can't keep doing the book, every month, and so we can only do it for whatever 7 issues or 8 issues, and then we have to take a break and have somebody else pick up on it. And it's like, okay, but I used to work with people who did it
for like a decade.
Yeah, so I'm not sure.
By hand, they didn't even have the technology.
Yeah, so I don't know. It's like, oh, the artwork's more detailed. It's like, all right, tell that to anybody. Pick your person. A lot of people do a lot of detail in their work. So anyway, it's not a diss. It's just different approach to things. Yeah. Hey, back to the boogeyman.
I love your I love your writing on these. I love the description of the Punisher. How do you call him? The widower with tunnel vision.
He is good. He is good.
Yeah.
He does have a very particular way of speaking and talking, and his worldview is hysterical. I mean, it's just, I think Carl Potts said he's my spirit animal.
Well, I was going to say, do you think is Terror more freeing for you? Because, like, if you write a Daredevil or a Punisher, there's, like, people expect that, like, Daredevil to act and think and talk a certain way. With Terror, there was kind of not as much expectation, so you're like, I can pretty much do what I want with him.
Well, everybody talks the way they should,
yes.
Right? And we've talked about this before, and, characters, unless you backed yourself into a corner and you're just trying to finish the job, or you're suddenly thinking you have a mission to show how clever you are and how many Joseph Campbell books you've read, and you're trying to shove stuff into a character's mouth, characters will talk like characters should talk. So Daredevil talks like Daredevil talks and thinks because I'm in the Daredevil zone, mm-hmm. Right? And somewhat that flow is coming about. I would say the same thing with Terror, except even more so. I always felt like I was sort of channeling Terror. Like there's there's this thing out here, and he's like telling me, no, this is the way you've got to write. And sometimes, I would pull one too many words from a business thesaurus to try to force, that sound of that business language in there. But by and large, that's how he looks at things, and if you go back to the Shadowline work, he talks that way there. We established that really early on, right from the get-go. I mean, he came very fully born. I mean, did I tell this story before? Like how we came up with this character, like me and Margaret Clark. I don't know if we mentioned this before, and it was just,
I don't know if we have.
We had been working. I mean, St. George was a character in the Shadowline. He was a human character who had gotten this mystic set of armor, and so the first issue was this origin story, and with the second issue, we knew we wanted to introduce a big bad, before that term was around, but we wanted a main villain for him that we felt we'd come back to. And we were usually pretty good as writing partners. We'd come up with concepts and characters and stuff pretty quickly, but we were racking our brains out, we couldn't come up with something that felt right, that felt powerful enough, that felt different enough. And it was a blistering hot New York City day. And, I remember we were working at Margaret's place, and, she had like a railroad apartment in Brooklyn. There's no air conditioning, so it was hot, middle of summer. My allergies are killing me. It's just like my eyes are red, and I can barely keep my eyes open, and let alone think. And at one point, my eyes are just so allergy ridden. I said, I would pay somebody to rip my eyes out of my skull right now. And at that exact moment, it was like, wait a minute. What if we had a character that could steal other people's body parts? And then we just like ping-ponged it back and forth. And within a really short amount of time, we suddenly had this character of what he could do. And then we said, well, let's add this, this element that he is, the counterpoint to that is he's not like the boogeyman and like, cackling and evil and, carnaging himself all over the place. He is like, he's the counterpoint. Like he's the most elegant, buttoned up, literal thing imaginable. So, in writing him, to get back to your point, Phil, I just feel like he's just kind of coming through. He's just a joy. And you put yourself in that mind. Matt Murdock would never say the things that he's saying, right? Yeah. And he would never talk like Matt Murdock. or Frank Castle for that matter. You know, Castle's dialogue here is Castle. You know, even the handful of lines I did in that recent Daredevil 8, you know, that anthology that had the little short black armored Punisher story in there. You know, he says only a few things, but he says only a few things that are just Frank Castle lines. You know, I mean, he talks more in this than he does in some other things, but every line is sort of very much, I think, how he feels he has to view the world and be the world. Punisher.
Yeah. I mean, I enjoyed their interaction. Well, you know, basically Tara's like, "Ew, you don't do this for money. You do this for free."
Yeah, exactly. Right, and then you have to sort of like, you know, find this kind of split difference of like, well, why doesn't the Punisher just like, you know, myrtleize him, you know, right off the bat, which he does try to do, and then of course we have Terror fake his death at the end, so that the Punisher can walk away, and we could still have Terror number 8, you know, afterwards. But we haven't touched on the whole villains of this story beyond Piranha Jones, which is, you know, the important, you know, point to the revelation, which is that the Mafia Princesses, which is this trio of you know, suburban villains who are basically manipulating everything behind the scenes. You know, they want to become the mob bosses of this community, and they've used Piranha Jones's contacts and reputation, you know, to sort of elevate themselves. You know, are all based upon my mother and her friends, right? They're basically like, you know, that's all them, you know. So you know, she had 2 other friends at that point in time, you know, who all the little qualities about them, always playing canasta and always going to Atlantic City and, you know, always smoking. And, you know, it was just basically the trio of them. And I had sent Jorge, you know, photos of them, and he got them pretty right. You know, they're pretty well represented, you know, throughout this. So it's, that was a fun bit.
Does your mom know she's in those issues?
Oh yeah. She actually has a little like printout of that introductory panel, you know, that I'd given her and her friends. So, she, you know, she enjoyed the, you know, the heck out of it. She's never read the story, you know, she just knows that she's there, and, you know, like her name's Vita. So, you know, it's Vita and Anne, and, you know, they're named after all of them. So it's all.
It's so cute.
But you mentioned the Punisher speaks a little more here. I actually thought for like a 90s story, you kind of like, if this had been another writer, another book, I think someone would have used the Punisher way more. I thought you were very sparingly with your use of the Punisher, because he kind of just shows up at the beginning of the first one and then towards the end of the second one. Yeah. I mean, it's sort of, yeah, whether that was right or not, I don't know. I mean, we certainly had enough confrontation between them.
Oh yeah. You know, there's a lot of brutality and gunfire.
Meaning he didn't just say, "Hey, they fight for 15 days."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, yeah, there's a lot more going on, right? To sort of stack the story, you know, together. But I mean, he's not missing. You know, he's there.
No. I just mean there are writers who would like build a whole story around the Punisher. Meanwhile, I think you were just like, I have this story, you know, this is my regular story going through, and oh yeah, by the way, Frank's going to show up for a little bit, you know.
Right. Yeah, he's not the driver of the story. He's an element within the story, and you know, he doesn't. He complicates the story. He complicates Terror's assignment.
Frank, he complicates everything.
Right. You know, he's the monkey. You know, he's the monkey in the wrench. But I think that, you know, you have to remember whose book it is too, right? You know, you have to remember where it's Terror's book, right? You don't want to suddenly give it all over the Punisher, because the Punisher's the bigger story, the bigger sales. But he's featured prominently enough that I think if any Punisher fan came along, they wouldn't be disappointed. And hopefully that's what you would be doing a character use like that for. A Punisher fan might never have heard of Terror Incorporated, but they might say, "Oh, here, Punisher's in this book. Let me check this out." But it still might not be their cup of tea. You know, I mean, Terror is not necessarily going to excite somebody who's all about gangland massacre vigilante.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's no violence. I mean, why not?
Oh, no. And he came, this was all part of when Terror was launched, and this was my great disappointment. And I sort of like saw the writing on the wall, like early on, like Terror came out as part of 4 or 5 collection of books loosely called The Big Guns. Like it wasn't like a cover thing or anything, but that was the push. I think there was a Punisher series in there. There was a UK series called Death's Head, Silver Sable, something else. They were all big, violent characters, and Terror Incorporated was part of that. And every single one of those books got a gimmick as well as a really nice poster. I don't know if I have it, but somebody's sent me a picture of it not too long ago as a reminder. But it was a really nice poster, and then every book had a first issue gimmick, right? And the gimmicks, of course, are ridiculous, but they had them. It was polybagged with a poster, or it was scratch and sniff, or it was
foil cover,
yeah, it was something. And we were the last of the group to come out, and we were supposed to get something as well. And then at the last minute, they pulled it.
Really?
And I don't know why they pulled it. Like it wasn't, we ran the numbers and it's not selling, so we're going to pull it, or whatever. But they just did. And they promised, we'll do it later. But when you promise, there's never a later. You either do it now or you don't do it.
If you're not going to do it for issue 1, when are you going to do it? Yeah.
Right. Some arbitrary issue 4 or something like that. I don't know. It sort of felt like, okay, this is not getting the attention, even though, again, it got that first issue rave review. And that could have been something, they might have played up more, but certainly I would have played it up more if maybe I should have printed it out on microfiche and left it in the local libraries for people to find as they were going to the microfiche viewer.
Oh my lord! Okay, yeah, I was doing a set. Where is this? Is this eBay or something? They had Big Guns hero caps.
Oh wow! Okay, what were the hero caps? Were those
are those like the Pogs or whatever? Maybe? Or...
yeah, I was going to say those Pogs. Yep, maybe.
I don't know if I see Terror on there. I see Death's Head. I see the Punisher and Silver Sable. I'm like, well...
Silver Sable. I think there was one other one. I can't remember who.
Deathlock. Is it Deathlock? I see. Deathlock.
Oh, maybe it was Deathlock. Yeah, maybe it was Deathlock. Yep, that sounds right. Yeah, and then Terror was the last of the group.
No, because I was looking.
You say Pogs too many times, guys. You'll bring them back to life.
It's like
every so often it gets a resurgence.
It's like a Beetlejuice thing. That's a pretty funny bit. Getting back to our comedy routines.
We got a set somewhere, and Luca was playing with them the one day, and he was like, what are these? And we had to kind of explain to him that whole 90s craze.
You could have just said they were the original NFTs.
Oh.
See, that would
work. They are fungible, so.
They were.
Oh, jeez.
So, I mean, they say that Terror is an anti-hero, but is that just pure marketing? Because I feel like a lot of people felt like he was just a straight up villain, and I don't know why Marvel tends to kind of shy away from giving their villains a book.
Yeah, he's not really an anti-hero. You're right, Lilith, and I mean I even use that term because there are instances where he has, I think, moral character, and he has character, and I think he says at one point he keeps it in a jar in his desk, like Ray Bradbury did. But and Ray Bradbury used to say, "I have the heart of a small boy. I keep it in a jar on my desk." And which is where I got the line in this issue where he says something about character or soul, and he got it from a nun, and he keeps it in a freezer in Omaha. But so there was we never got to the scene to sort of see like one of his like moored collections. I always thought there was like the Punisher had safe houses and had collections of weapons and safe houses. I always had this idea that Terror would have these collections of body parts in hidden locations, like across the world and the country, So if he needed like something very specialized, he already had it like, located away somewhere. But
I know when he said that, I was like, oh, does he have like, stuff all over the world? Like storage lockers
That was
stuff.
the idea.
Yeah,
I never got to that scene, but and there was always the thing, he has this one metal hand, right? His left hand is metal that he never replaces, right? That's the one thing that never gets replaced. And there was a backstory to that, and we sort of nod to it toward the end of the run, that there was a woman, he was in love with hundreds of years ago, and she was in love with him, even in his twisted condition. And when she died, you know, he'd encased her hand in this metal. So he's always got that emotional connection to her, which is like lightly touched on. You probably have to like read between the lines to kind of get all that out there. But so, you know, he has character, and there are moments where he does things.
Loves Vanessa. Your point? Still a terrible person.
Exactly. No. I'm not saying he's good. I'm not saying he's good, but I think, you know, he every now and again he does things that are okay. Confusion. Yeah. Not, but you know, for his own purposes. You know, he's a bit of a MacGuffin not a MacGuffin. He's a bit of a Hail Mary pass actually in this Captain America Punisher series. You know, Blood and Glory. You know, Margaret and I had written that as well, and we got to the end of the story, and we kind of backed ourselves into a corner. It's like, oh, how are Cap and Punisher going to find out about like this important thing? And so we said, well, Tara would know because Tara's got a body part. You know? Nice. So suddenly Tara shows up, he showed up in a couple of Daredevil issues, you know, as a way to pass information along. And there was always that line, you know, was his most quote unquote famous line was, you know, it's nothing personal, it's just business, even though sometimes it clearly was very personal.
Business is very personal. Don't let anybody tell you different.
Exactly. But the other line that I really loved, which was, I can't remember where I got it from, but it was more of a mobster sort of line. It's like, I don't do favors, I collect debts. Right. Mm-hmm. And so like that was always the thing, right? That's another business exchange. He's collecting a debt. He's giving Daredevil a piece of information, because later on he's going to come and he's going to say, all right, now, you know, now I want something back. So there's that marginal goodness, or, you know, there's no moral, I'm not going to say that it's a moral gray zone. It's just like a moral nothing zone, right? It's always how does this work for the situation that I need to do it in? So they can say anti-hero, but he wasn't really, you know, he wasn't good, but he wasn't bad either. At least the way you write it, right? I don't write, I think you write Frank Castle, and Frank Castle is in this brutal situation to destroy all crime and murder all bad guys or potential bad guys in some ways. But I think at the heart of it, Frank still knows, well, this is wrong, but I'm the only one that it needs to be done, and I'm the one to do it, right? And I'm just, boom, move forward. You know, Terror is different, right? He's not sort of like going around saying, I mean, there probably was a story never written to sort of figure out where he became this mercenary along the way. But in our interactions as writers and readers and such, you know, all we've got is the mercenary, which is, I don't know, still fun.
Yeah.
You know, he's sort of like the grizzly reacher, right?
He's a good character. You have to hand it to him.
Exactly. There you go. Thank you very much.
But yeah, like you mentioned that when he gave Daredevil that information in Dead Man's Hand, I was waiting for that scene where, you know, Matt's basically like, oh, you know, like I owe him something, and, you know, so when's it going to come doing stuff. I was waiting for a typical 90s hero scene, you know, when like the Avengers or Spider-Man or someone's trying to stop Terror and Daredevil swings in like, no, you got to let him go, and everyone's like, what? No, wait, right. What?
Right. That would have been fun. Mm-hmm. That would have been fun. I mean, there was a long afternoon, you know, where I thought about, could I get him into black armor, you know, with the whole thing, and I, you know, it would have been like the equivalent of the Kingpin scene, you know, it would have really been a scene that doesn't necessarily extend the story.
There wasn't enough room.
It wasn't enough room. I mean, even when it was 5 issues, there wasn't enough room to and it would have felt.
Phil and I actually kind of placed our bets on that. Like, we were like, you think Tara's going to show?
No, I mean, it would have been the push too far. It would have been the self-indulgent push too far and so I was very good about policing myself. I think.
I don't know, Sapolsky. Sounds like we need a sequel to Black Armor.
Oh, we do need a sequel.
Oh, we do.
Absolutely.
We do.
But
trying to manifest that.
But I think there's, I think that was the sign of maturity.
After all these years,
After all these years, you know, not to sort of slug it in there. Whereas again, these two stories are, you know, like the whole town, the whole layout of the town. That's all.
Yeah.
I mean, if you remember, Stamford was the epicenter of Civil War.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Wasn't that where the explosion happened that triggered out, the whole Superhero Registration Act. I destroyed Stamford long before, we did that by having that fire truck and racing down the main streets and
that would have been a scene, like Tara at a flea market after Stamford gets blown up in Civil War. Tara just shows up. Oh, you take this? I'll take this body part. I'll take this. I'll take this.
That would have been fun, actually. Yeah, that's sort of like the evil damage control, right?
Exactly.
That
would just anger certain Captain America.
How did I never talk to Dwayne? I don't remember when. That would have been a funny scene to talk to Dwayne McDuffie about, like putting a damage control scene in where like this guy Terror shows up, like what wondering if any of the things you picked up might be for sale. No, I don't want the equipment. I just want the
body.
I want the body parts. That would have been really funny. That's inspired.
Make it happen, Marv.
Dwayne would have gone for it too.
Nice. But no, back to your one point about the anti-hero versus villain. Like, I think you could sell a villain book now, but back in the 90s, was that the big hook? Was it, it's like, I don't know if we could sell a villain book, but anti-hero, we can sell that all over the place.
Well, that term was all over the place. Yeah. Anti-hero was all over the place. And, you had violent characters in movies and comics and TV to some extent. And that hyper.
They're like, I don't know if we could sell a pure evil villain, but a guy who kills for the right reason, quote unquote. We could sell that.
Yeah. That was the balancing thing. You're coming up. I always have my Dirty Harry poster here, and Dirty Harry as a character is really a villain. In many ways. He's got a badge, but he's horrendous in almost everything he does, but he does it for the right reasons. There was never any discussion of that. We just sort of position him as an anti-hero. Yeah. When you're writing the character, if you're doing when I wrote the Strucker scenes in Black Armor, I wasn't thinking of Strucker as the villain. I'm thinking of Strucker as, like, when I'm writing the Daredevil scenes, yes, he's the villain. But when I'm writing the Strucker scenes, Strucker's just like talking about the stuff he talks about all the time, crushing the little people and having a great time. So when you write Terror, he's not a villain. He's just the guy. This is what he does. He is, be it like Lilith, like you were saying, business is awful. Business is awful. And so, there's, you see people firing, CEOs firing rather dozens, hundreds of people by Zoom meetings. I'm sorry, I'll take Terror over that person any day of the week. I think taking someone's nose is a much more honorable way than destroying their life via Zoom on a Tuesday afternoon.
It could have been a sticky note or an email.
Yeah, exactly. Couldn't this have been an email? So I don't. There was never a discussion of it, Phil. But anti-hero was certainly the phrase of the day, right? That is how that's how you justified Frank. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Frank has gone through, I think I mentioned this to you guys when we were talking about Daredevil 8. I had gone down this, after writing that story, I was suddenly inspired or interested in reading, well, what's been going on with the Punisher? It's kind of, I had a fun time. What's happened? So I was reading all these different stories, and obviously they've gone through all these different interpretations of how do you justify having a character who is a murderer, right? Under any stretch of the imagination, still showing up as a main driver. And then with all the other cultural issues and the way people interpret him. And even Devin, took me to task, Devin, the editor on the Daredevil books. He worked very hard with me to push some of that stuff harder than I did initially, in a good way. I was very appreciative of that, to make sure that we were identifying Frank in the right way, especially in a Daredevil story. I think it's different if it's just a Frank Castle story. But yeah, by any real interpretation, Terror was always Terror. This is what I was saying with Marcus, and Marcus saying, "Oh no, it's a different character. They just happen to look the same." Like Terra was created as a villain.
Don't dumb your audience. Because
Yeah,
I see a lot of the letters in the book. Stop saying it's not true.
Yeah. I don't know if Mark, and I said that to him. Did you have to do that? Where like somebody tell you, don't cross the streams. We don't want to muck with the continuity or something.
Was that like a legal thing? Maybe, or like if they acknowledged that, would they have to pay like extra royalties to all of you who worked on the original stuff? Or
no, not at all. I mean, the Shadow Line was created by Archie Goodwin.
They love
initially.
to pretend like Epic didn't exist. That's the whole thing at the end of the day, unfortunately. Which I said, it's some of the first stuff I ever read, and I think it's great.
There is a lot of great stuff from Epic, and few people remember. Now they think Epic and they think it's the giant size collections, right? The Epic, they're all, because those are called the Epic collections. No, Phil, because Archie had created those characters in that Shadow Line. Archie Goodwin had created the Shadow Line as a set of company-owned books to try to give Epic an anchor point of identity, because there were so many. Epic we did great work. I'll say that, and all the people who worked on it with passion. All the creators who came brought original, vibrant ideas. But unlike Vertigo, which sort of had a house style and maybe an overarching tone, right? Even though the books weren't interconnected, Epic was super eclectic, right? You'd go from Hellraiser to Gru the Wanderer to Video Jack to Martial Law to Moonshadow. Everything was tonally different, visually different. And so Archie, thought if there was a set of superhero books, that those could act as an anchor point for Epic, get some people looking at Epic, and then from there they would maybe be interested. Oh, what else does Epic do? So they own the Shadow Line. They owned it then. They own it to this day. But to this day, as far as I know, they've never re-acknowledged it or brought it out or moved those characters. The New Universe characters, didn't they get melded or moved over at one point to Marvel, and then probably left in Hoboken or something, since nobody wanted to do anything with them?
I know. Yeah, like I know a few years ago they had the Star brand in the Avengers book and stuff. Yeah.
Okay. But I mean, as far as I know, they've never done anything with the Shadow Line stuff. They never brought those characters over. They never collected those things, together. I don't know if there's any value, in it. Although, you had, Dennis Cowan, created the visual look for Dr. Zero. Klaus Janson created the visual look for St. George, and did those early issues. Dave Ross was the artist on Powerline, which we always treated as kind of the weak link in the book, and I don't feel, in retrospect, we treated Dave with quite as much respect, but it's very serviceable comics. And then, we had a lot of great people work on the mega
that's
collection.
What I don't get, if you know your comic book history, you can go look at Epic and go, wow, they worked on, yeah, they did.
Yeah. I mean, there's
people got their bones. So I've never figured it out why they kind of like pretend like it doesn't exist. Right.
So there's no legal reason that they couldn't have, done anything with that. There was no, we got to pay those guys, when they did the, Dave Lapham did like a Terror Incorporated miniseries, the Max series, which I didn't read. Was it any good? Did you read it, Lilith? I don't know. I know he had a jumpsuit or something on, which kind of turned me off to the look of it.
The Max books I've never really resonated with. It just feels gratuitous for the sake of gratuitous. Like that, I guess that's the point of the Max line, because every single Max book that I've ever read, whether it's Deadpool or somebody else, that's just kind of the theme of it. And that was just kind of unfortunate. I was really excited for it, and then I'm like, okay, that makes sense, because that's one of the Punisher things I read was the Max series, and I thought it was extraordinarily gratuitous. But I remember contacting Marvel when I heard those were coming out, and I said, please do get. You guys need to remember that we created these things. I said, so please get created by, me and Margaret and Klaus, in those books. And I don't know if they did or not, because I didn't pick them up. But, I know I did reach out just for that reason. But that's just to kind of keep the continuity going. And then if anything was to happen, if suddenly, they were to do a dark side of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and this guy shows up, I just want to make sure that through line is there. Well, they did try to fill in with Mercs for money and
he did kind of show up in there, yeah.
And I was just like, it needed a softer touch. Like, I think it was just, everything was just too obvious, and when you
Mercs for Money, was that the
Deadpool?
He was in the,
Deadpool
he was in the purple Deadpool costume, right? Which was like that's what I mean by that's excuse me, stupid. For this character, he doesn't need to wear an overcoat the whole time. He could change his look and modernize his look or something, but he should still be, he should be a John Wicky character, not a Deadpool knockoff. Like, somebody sent, contacted me and said, I have a Terror Incorporated Funko, character, would you autograph it for me? And I was like really excited. It's like, Funko made a Terror Incorporated character, and I'm expecting this little bobblehead thing with spikes out of his face to show up in the mail. And instead it's this little purple, Deadpool. And I was like, oh, okay. The guy obviously loved it. And I was like, okay, well, I'm happy to do it for you. But,
All right, I want to throw this out. We need a mini-series. I don't know if you ever thought of putting these characters head-to-head. All right, we need like a mini-series where Terror battles Surgeon General.
I don't.
The race for body parts.
I don't know if I have
he says
quite
he's not self-indulgent anymore, Phil. Come on, don't.
The race for body parts.
The race for body parts begins. That would have been like, that would have been the cover copy right there. And then Daredevil, like, in the center of it, like, going, just. I thought the Grease story was bad enough, and it's like, now this, that would have definitely.
But I really enjoyed Terror. Like I said, the gore, but then the way that you kind of balance the pathos of it with having the emotional attachment to the body part, I think is something kind of gives them more balance.
Yeah, and he's funny. I mean, it's dark, but I think he's pretty damn funny. I mean, he's, he makes me laugh out loud, a couple points. He's got the real, cool wit to it. Stylistically, not stylistically. I think if I got to go on back in time, I would have lost the craggy caption shapes, because I think they get a bit much after a point because he has so much narrative stuff going on. I think that kind of complicates the page too much. But that's really, that and a couple of thesaurus words. I think the rest of it tracks pretty well. You could have just had that yellowish, greenish color on his captions to track, what was going on. And since the only captions are his internal monologue, it really doesn't matter. But anyway, I'm glad you guys enjoyed it.
And again, modern comics, like we say, modern comics could never. You had everything: Terror, Terror, Punisher, your mom. I mean, everything was in this issue.
Yes, exactly. Everything. There's no shortage of, there's old villains, there's sidekicks, there's the sharper images in there. We had mall culture. I had
90s.
Again,
so
90s, of course.
So 90s. But that is the mall in Stanford, and that is, it is very much, it is
must have a
very
much Sonoma right next door. It has to.
Yeah, it did at that point. Yeah, it was very much a thing of its time.
If you know, you know.
I just had this sneaking suspicion. I was like, I think he personally knew this mall. So
I did. I mean, I did. I gave him photo reference. He did a great job. It was like that walking. And, I think there's something to that. Like when you know the space of something, you can frame things out and it creates a better environment. It's not important for anybody else to know that, that walkway actually does exist. That kind of connects it. But it helps you think about the action and the violence and the repercussions and how things move from scene to scene. And then it maybe creates a logical flow that helps you connect the parts of the story together. At least that's what I found.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I felt the fun in your heart through the pages for sure.
Yes, there was fun. There was fun in my heart. Somebody's heart with Hera.
Oh, my. All right. Anything else? Should we give this man homework?
Yeah, let's do the homework.
All right. Well, I'm going to need you guys to help me pick something here because I haven't read these yet, so I don't know if we should do the whole run or should we just do the first couple, but I have already ordered Dr. Zero, so...
Wow. I don't know if you want to do the whole run. I mean, you can.
What was it, 7 or something?
I think there were 8 issues each. I think 8 or 9, and then Howard Mackey wrote the last of the issues because I had asked him to pick up on them while we transitioned to the critical mass sort of maxi series.
So like I said, I haven't read them yet, so I don't know what, like, do you want to do the first, like, is there an arc, or is the first issue like, where should we start?
I would read, they're kind of, there's an arc-ish thing, they're individual issues. I would read at least the first two.
Okay.
Because the first issue of all of them, Shadowline, St. George, Dr. Zero, and Powerline are all a little, we were so nervous and green and having to set everything up and taking on this whole line that Archie had given us, God knows why. They're a little bit getting our sea legs under us. So I think it really kind of, each of the books are hit its stride in two. But you could probably read the first two issues and get a good vibe from it.
All right. So that first two issues, Dr. Zero, that's our homework then?
All right. Sounds good. All right.
All right.
And then if anybody is in
yes,
Oklahoma City next weekend for the GalaxyCon, I will be there for Memorial Day weekend with my red, white, and blue cowboy boots. And first person who shows up at my table with a Black Armor comic or the collection, even better, which the collection is now, you get your autograph for free.
Ooh.
And if you show up in a Black Armor cosplay, I will gift you an entire set of the original Fall from Grace issues for the person who shows up in a Black Armor cosplay. So I still haven't seen that in the wild.
Does anyone think if they show up in a Terror cosplay?
Wow. Well, anybody who comes up over and just talks about Terror Incorporated, we'll get some Terror tchotchkes. So yeah, they will get some Terror parts. Let's put it that way.
Oh, nice. That's what you need, like a bunch of rubber hands or something. Be like, oh, you like Terror? Here you go. I
swear to God, if there was
3D print out some
little metal hands.
3D print out some metal hands. Yeah,
exactly. If there was a like a Terror Incorporated miniseries or like one shot, I could somehow get off the ground and I could promote that. I would definitely be giving out little body part things.
I mean, it sounds like a joke, but Marvel, I would buy that Terror vs. Surgeon General miniseries. Pay this man to make that happen. Come on.
Anyway, all right, guys. I have my homework.
Yes, sir.
You have a great Saturday. Unfortunately, I have to go back to this work, so that's not as interesting as this conversation.
Redacted. I know it was all
exactly. Redacted. It's
This
pages of stuff that don't look particularly interesting.
Secret
but we'll pay the bills.
Well, we appreciate you as always.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, guys. Good seeing you both. Take care.
Too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.